I'll be your presenter tonight. My name's Amy Soddy, and I am one of FIA's Higher Education Access Partners. I cover all of Allegheny County, and really my job, my role is to help all of my families and students through the financial aid process. And so that's why tonight we're really going to talk about that Financial Aid 101. Now, whenever I start a presentation talking about financial aid, I always like to just start off with a definition. So what do I mean when I say financial aid? Well, financial aid consists of the funds that are provided to students and to families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. So if we break down that definition, what does it mean? Well, a post-secondary education being any education after high school, whether your student is going on for a certificate program, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, financial aid is there to help with some of the expenses, some things that you might have to pay for, expenses that we know like tuition, fees, housing, meal plan, etc. But the key word, honestly, to this definition is that financial aid is there to help. But rarely do we see financial aid covering the full cost to attend a post-secondary institution. So it's extremely important as we think about financial aid and we talk about the different types, that you're aware that it only goes so far. And for a majority of students, after financial aid is applied, there is still a gap. There's still an amount that's left over to be paid. And what's that going to look like for you and for your family? And what are your next steps? All of that we're going to talk about tonight. Now, there are three main types of aid that we'll talk about. We have our gift aid. So that's our free money. That would be a grant or a scholarship, right? Money that doesn't have to be paid back. Then there is self-help type of financial aid. We're going to talk about work-study programs. And lastly, our loans. And loans are borrowed money, right? So when you borrow a loan, you're using that money to help with those educational expenses with the understanding that that loan will be paid back. That's money that you will owe. So when we talk about the types of financial aid, it's important to also know that it comes from different funding sources. And you might be like, well, why do I really care, right? I just want the financial aid. I don't necessarily need to know where it's coming from. The reason you want to care where it's coming from is because all of the different funding sources, the federal government, we at FIA, again, we're the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, along with the school or college you're interested in, they all might have their own regulations, their own deadlines, their own application processes. So you want to make sure you're aware of where that money is coming from, so that if it's a renewable source, meaning you can receive that year after year, that you're doing that, right? That you're getting that money each year that you're eligible. So tonight we're going to talk about the 5 steps to financial aid. We're going to kind of break down the process into these 5 main steps. And we're going to start with step 1, which is to look for free money first. Now, when it comes to searching for scholarships, it is never too early to begin that search process. So most of the time, the folks listening are parents of seniors or seniors themselves. But if you are not a senior yet, or your student is not a senior yet, maybe you're a junior or younger, you can still begin that scholarship search process. And for my seniors, this is the time that you need to be searching for scholarship opportunities. You might even find some scholarships now where it's something that is last year's scholarship, right? They haven't posted this year's yet. But when you see those scholarships, even if you're looking now, you can write them down, you can keep track of them, maybe, save them on your browser or save them in an Excel sheet. But keeping track of those scholarships, because typically year after year, the same scholarships are posted with the same requirements, the same deadlines. And so by finding those opportunities now and keeping track, you'll know exactly what scholarships you want to apply for the second that they are available. Now,
and Amy, can I just jump in here real quick? Because for Quaker Valley, it's important for parents to know there's really a large number of scholarships that are only available to Quaker Valley students. So the bulletin board we use for all the local scholarships we're notified about is on Naviance. So when students log into Naviance and click on the colleges tab, there's a section called scholarships and money there. We post all of them there, but when they are specific to Quaker Valley, I will email the senior class, or if it is open to juniors as well, I will specifically email students those opportunities so that they know this is exclusive to Quaker Valley. So I just want to make sure that students know that those opportunities are always sent through email. And it's important for parents to know that parents are always copied on every email that I send the senior class. So parents will definitely know about those scholarship opportunities as well. If you're a parent and you're listening and you're not receiving emails from me, please send me an email. It could be that the email that I used out of PowerSchool is not the same email that you are using on a daily basis. So just feel free to let me know what email address you'd prefer I use. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so some of those scholarships too that you might see, they might be smaller amounts. And I know sometimes when I talk to students, they see a scholarship for $500 or $1,000 and they're like, it's not really worth my time to apply. But you know what? Those smaller scholarships typically have less applicants. So you have a better chance of receiving a smaller scholarship for $500 than you would for one for, let's say, 5,000. And those smaller scholarships can add up and they can stack up over time to really help save you money in the long run. So even those smaller scholarships, definitely take the time, even if it's to write an essay, or fill out an application, it is worth your time and your effort. And then lastly is to search for scholarships every year. Now, of course, we're going to push, your counselor is going to push, right, for all of you senior year to be applying for scholarships. But even once you leave high school, you should be searching for scholarships every single year. So even as a returning college student, you need to be in that scholarship search process. There are specific scholarships that you really won't find or be aware of that are for returning college students until you begin searching. And they might require that you have completed a certain number of college credits or have a certain college GPA before you can even apply for that scholarship. And even on your college campus, they might have specific money set aside for returning college students. So you should be looking kind of everywhere when it comes to scholarships and again, searching every single year. Now, there are lots of different types of scholarships. There's also lots of different criteria when it comes to searching for scholarships, and utilizing your counselor, utilizing your high school is a great place to be searching, along with also the college or institution that you're applying to, or many, if you're applying to many schools, asking each one about their scholarship opportunities. First off, do they even have scholarships? And if they do, how do you apply? Is it just through the application to the college? Is there a separate application? Are there any deadlines you need to be aware of? Make sure you're asking those types of questions so you can be aware of that process. And lastly, there are some national scholarship search sites. Again, as a reminder, I am recording tonight's presentation. I am going to send out the recording to all of you and the presentation slides to all of you by the end of the week. One of the last slides of this presentation is just a few national scholarship search sites. There are so many more out there, but it's a good place just to start your search process. But of course, keep in mind, right, when you're searching nationally, you're competing against students all across the US. So that's why the biggest emphasis is on those locally, through your high school, and of course through the college themselves. Now, one thing I'd recommend if my students haven't done this already, or maybe they did this a while ago and it needs some updating, is to complete and create a scholarship resume. Now, a scholarship resume is not like a job resume. It does not need to be limited to a page or 2 pages. It can be as long as you want, where you list anything and everything you've done throughout high school. Make sure it's organized, it looks nice. But this way, when you're filling out those scholarship applications, you can copy and paste that information right onto the application. And sometimes the application might even say, if you have any additional information you'd like to attach for the committee to be aware of, do so here. Well, if you have that scholarship resume, which is a few pages and has everything you've done throughout high school, attach that with your application so that they can consider all of your experience, right? Everything that you've participated in. Now, one thing I recommend, especially if you're interested in a private college or university, is asking them, if I receive any scholarship money, like outside scholarship money, will that impact or affect my financial aid here at the school? Our state schools, our state-related schools don't do this, but our private schools have the ability where they might reduce the scholarship that the college offered you because they later find out that you received an outside scholarship. If this is something that the school that you're interested in does, you want to be aware of this now as part of the process and not find this out later on when it's July and you found out you got a scholarship and you're super excited, only to find out that the college is going to reduce some of their financial aid. So I would definitely ask and reach out to schools to see if this is something you need to consider or be aware of as you begin that search process, and maybe as you're even applying, right? Some of you have already applied to schools, so reaching out to them to double check. Now, step 2 is to know your deadlines. And for my students, especially senior year, there are a lot of deadlines that you're going to have to keep track of. Deadlines just to apply to the school, right? Many have a deadline for when you need to submit that application. There are going to be deadlines for scholarships, whether that's at the colleges or outside sources. And some colleges even have deadlines for when you have to submit the FAFSA application. So one of the biggest tips here that I would recommend is creating a master calendar. Go through all of the different colleges' websites you're interested in, write down those important dates on one calendar, and that way you can make sure you're on track month after month as you go through your senior year. Now, one deadline you can make sure you put on that master calendar is the Pennsylvania State Grant deadline. So in order to be considered for the Pennsylvania State Grant, and that's a free money, need-based, we'll talk more about it later on, you must complete your FAFSA application by May 1st. And that's a yearly deadline, so every year you actually have to complete the FAFSA. Every year you would want to complete it prior to May 1st. So I would put that maybe in your phone as a reoccurring deadline, just as a reminder. It's honestly just a good reminder to have your FAFSA done before the end of the academic year, just so you don't forget about it. So I would just put that maybe end of April as a yearly deadline so you don't forget. But honestly, my seniors, I don't want any of you waiting until May or even end of April to complete your FAFSA. Like I said, some schools have deadlines for when you need to get that application submitted. I have seen deadlines as early as mid-January, early February. So I would recommend getting that FAFSA done in January or early February. And again, you can always double check with the schools to see if they have any deadlines that you need to be aware of. Now, I just mentioned the FAFSA application, but maybe you're not sure, you haven't heard of what that is. The FAFSA is our step 3, and that's because the FAFSA is really the connection to funding. It's a federal form, and it helps to determine a student's eligibility for many different programs. So just by completing the FAFSA, you're automatically considered for all types of federal aid, which we'll talk about. We at FIA use your FAFSA to determine eligibility for the Pennsylvania State Grant, and many colleges use the FAFSA to determine eligibility for some of their institutional aid. So one form applies you for many different types of aid and from many different funding sources. And that's why it's so important to get that application completed. Now, it is completely online. It's an electronic form. You would go to studentaid.gov/FAFSA to complete it. And like I said, you have to file it every year. And typically you would begin to file this October 1st of your student's senior year. Now it's December, right? And none of my seniors have done the FAFSA application yet. And that is because this year it is delayed. So all of my seniors, if you are interested in going to any type of schooling after high school, if you're going in fall 2024 or spring 2025, you're going to be completing the 2024-25 FAFSA. And that's the application that is going to be delayed, and it will be released by December 31st. Now, FSA, FAFSA has said it will be out on December 31st. It might have a soft launch a day or two before, but I will tell you, because I do this for a living, and I do the FAFSA every single year with countless families, the first week it opens up, even on a normal year, it crashes like crazy that first week because so many people are going to the website and there's so many users and it cannot handle it. The website just crashes unexpectedly. It has a lot of errors. I have seen people go through the whole application, get to the last screen, hit next, and it crashes. I don't want any of you to have to deal with that. So what I would recommend on your master calendar, make a note, first week of January, maybe, January 8th, that week, that's when I would go out there personally and I would start that FAFSA process. Let some of those other people experience the issues in the beginning. Save yourself that time, go out around January 8th or that week and get that FAFSA application submitted. Now, the cool thing about the FAFSA is you can start that application, save it, and come back to it, right? You don't have to go through the whole process in one sitting. And so I do have families where they'll run into issues and I'm like, all right, cool, save it, reach out to me. I'll get back to you that day or the next day, and we can go through it together, right? I can always help you with those questions. Also, FSA, FAFSA has their own help guides and chat feature that's available. So you can always call them or chat with them if you're running into issues. Again, due to so many users though, sometimes the chat can be and calling in can be a really long wait. So that's why if you're doing it at night, I would just save it where you are. Send me your questions. I'll get back to you, right? And we'll be able to get through it together. You don't have to fret and spend hours on it if you run into issues. Now, one thing though I will recommend is this is something I would do now. So this month, I would go out there and I would create your FSA ID account. So the student, the one who's actually applying for financial aid, needs this account. The account is linked to your name, your date of birth, your social security number. So you as a person can only have one account. So your student needs to go out there and create an account, and that's how they're going to access the FAFSA form. But in addition to the student, if they are a dependent student, which we're going to talk about the definition for that, but if they're a dependent student, at least one parent is also going to have to go out there and create an FSA ID account using the parent name, date of birth, social security number, etc. Now, if you already have an account because you've created one for a prior child, you don't need to create another one. You can use the account you created for yourself or for another child to complete multiple children's FAFSA applications. But you're going to need these accounts for the next few years, right? However long you're in college and sometimes even beyond if you get federal student loans. So when you create these accounts, make sure you write down your username and your password. And if you're going to have to make some challenge and security questions. So write those down as well, just in case you ever have issues getting logged back into that account. In addition to that, something else that you can do is just making sure that you have some of this information that FAFSA is going to ask for readily available. Now, you might not need it right in front of you, but just in general, if you have this information or you know where it is, it's going to make the process of going through the FAFSA a lot quicker. So obviously, social security numbers, you'll need this when you're creating the FSA ID accounts, but also when you fill out the FAFSA form. Email addresses, students, I do not recommend using your high school email address when creating the FSA ID or when filling out your FAFSA. Again, you're going to need this for years and years to come. Also, a lot of my students lately are using their iCloud accounts. I've seen a lot of issues where the students aren't receiving emails when they get confirmations from FAFSAs or when they're trying to get the security codes. So I would honestly not use an iCloud account. I would create a different one if you don't already have a different email address. It needs to be something that, again, you're checking and you're going to get those updates. Now, the FAFSA for all my seniors is going to be asking about 2022 tax information. You don't need the tax return right in front of you. For most families, it should automatically pull over from the IRS. But just in case there's issues or just in case you are asked for some of that information, just knowing where your 2022 tax returns are for the parent of my dependent students and for my students if they filed can be a lifesaver, just to know where those are. So maybe if you're not sure where they are, just looking for them this month, making sure they're set aside just in case you need them. Now, also, the FAFSA, in addition to asking about income information, is also going to ask about asset information. When it asks about assets, the first question is how much total do you have as of today in cash, checking accounts, saving accounts? And it's going to ask this of the student. And then later it's going to ask this of the parent, right? So student, how much total do you have in cash, checking, savings? Later, parents, how much do you have in checking, cash, savings? And you would just report the total. And if you don't have any, you'd put 0. And the second question is how much total do you have in investments? Now, the cool thing about the FAFSA is there are help tools built in. So especially when you get to some of those investment questions, if you're kind of confused about what it's asking for, there's a tiny little question mark after each question. If you click on it, help tool will pop open. And especially when you get to something like the investments, it'll have a whole list of this is what's included, this is what's reported, these are things that would not be reported. And they might even give you some examples of how to calculate that. So some of the big things that would be reported: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, college savings accounts, right? So a 529 plan is reported as an investment. Now, if it's something that's held by the parent for the child filling out the FAFSA, that would be reported as a parent investment. So it would go under the parent's investment information. I get asked this all the time. What if it's like a grandparent or someone that's not their parent that has the 529 account? Then it does not need to be reported on the FAFSA form. One thing that's not reported as an investment are retirement investments. So if you have a retirement IRA or retirement 401k, that does not get reported on the FAFSA. And sometimes families don't realize that because they don't attend this workshop or they don't attend a workshop on this. And it's not going to put that right in the investment question. That's something that would be in the help tool. So again, if you open up that help tool, there's a whole list of what is an asset and what is not. So I would encourage you just to double check because it's a lot. I can't go into each one. We might be here all night, but I would just double check to make sure that you're reporting the right information. If you have questions on that, right? If you have investments, whatever that means for you, I would just look at that help tool to make sure, you're reporting everything that you need to. And go ahead.
Amy, can I just jump in here? I just want to be super clear for any juniors and junior parents that might be listening that they should not submit a FAFSA until they are a senior and they're getting ready to apply for aid for the first year they will be full-time college students, correct?
Yes, very correct. Good call. Yes. So for my junior families, it is way too early to create an FSA ID account, way too early to do the FAFSA. I will say that FSA has said, this year it's delayed to that December 31st. Next year, they have said that they are going to go back to October 1st release date. So for all my junior families, it should be back to normal next year with that October 1st release. So you'd go out in September to create the FSA IDs and then in October to do the FAFSA. But it is way too early now. This is just for senior families, specifically this information. Now, most of this, though, will look the same next year. For juniors, you'll be using 2023 income information and so forth. But yes, it's too early right now for that process. Now, one thing too, the reason it's delayed this year, I get this question too, why is it delayed? There's a lot of changes this year. They're trying to make the form faster, easier, and they've updated a lot. And so with that, that's why they had to push it back. They want to make sure that, when it's released, hopefully it's good to go. And so that's why it has been delayed. So that being said, if you've done this process in the past, this could look a little bit different this year. And if you have any returning college kids, it's going to look a little different than when they went through this process. One of those differences, honestly, the biggest one, is how you log into the form. This year, really, the way that they're pushing is for the student to be the first one to go to FAFSA, the studentaid.gov, access the FAFSA form, and the student to start the process. So the student would log in, start the FAFSA, they'll select that they're a student, and they will go through the whole student section. So they'll answer all the questions just about the student. So all their personal information, etc., as they go through the form. We are going to talk about what to do in different parent situations. We're going to get to that in maybe 3 or 4 slides, but we will talk about parent information in just a bit. But just because FAFSA really pushes for the student to start the process, I'm going to kind of go through what the student side looks like, and then we'll talk a lot more about parent info. So one of the first things that the student's going to have to do through the student process is to list any schools that they're interested in attending. So if they have applied to any school, they need to list that school on the FAFSA application. If they haven't yet applied to schools, but they're interested or they're considering it, you would still fill out the form, put any school that they're considering, right? Even if they haven't applied yet, you can still list them on the FAFSA form. Definitely want to list more than one. Hopefully you're all interested in more than just one school because you really want to compare your options and see what that cost is going to be for you. And you can actually list up to 20 at a time. If something changes, you submit the FAFSA application and realize later, I forgot a school, you can go back on and update that. So you can always update that school information. It's not set in stone. Now, as the student goes through their section, there's going to be a few different questions that are asked to figure out, is the student dependent, meaning they must provide parent information, or are they independent, meaning they are not required to provide any parent information. So how do you know? Well, if the student goes through these questions and they answer no to all of these questions, then it's going to say, based on your answers, you're a dependent student. And so you must provide parent info. So what are the questions? Well, student, are you 24 years or older? Are you married? Do you have any children? Are you a veteran or serving on active duty? Do you already have a 4-year bachelor's degree and are working on a further education? Are you a legally emancipated minor, or does someone other than your parents have legal guardianship over you? Are you an orphan, ward of the court, or were you in foster care at all since the age of 13? Or are you an unaccompanied youth and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? So if you go through all those questions, answer no to all of them, then it's going to tell you you're a dependent student and you must provide parent information. Now, every session, I always get one question. There's, maybe a student that doesn't live with their biological or adoptive parents for whatever reasons. There might be a special circumstance in which you need to kind of go through a review process with the financial aid offices at the schools you're interested in. But how would you know? Well, when you go through the FAFSA, if there's a special circumstance, and this provides a few examples of what that might look like, but if there's a special circumstance as to why you're unable to provide parent information, you can check that there's a special circumstance, hit continue. You will skip over all the parent questions, but the schools, when they get your FAFSA, are going to reach out and they're going to say, hey, we received your FAFSA. You mentioned there's a special circumstance. Here's your next steps. There is an appeal process. You will have to submit some documentation, but the schools will work with you one-on-one to go through that process. So if you're not living with your parents for a specific reason, try that process or reach out to me. Those are usually handled on a case-by-case basis. We can kind of talk through your situation to figure out what might be best for you in that situation. But for all my dependent students, those that are required to provide parent information, sometimes it's not always clear whose information needs to be provided. So the student is going to be walked through these questions to figure out whose information needs to be on their form. So first question is, are your parents married to each other? If the student says yes, then you're going to have to report both parents' information on the form. Now, if the student says, no, my parents are not married, the next question is, do your parents live together? If the student says yes, so they're unmarried, but they live together, then it's going to say, okay, report both parents' information. And again, this would be biological or adoptive parents. Okay. The last question is, are your parents divorced or separated? If the student answers yes, so they're divorced or separated, then it's going to say, well, which parent provided the more financial support for you over the past 12 months? So the day you're sitting down to file the FAFSA, which parent provided the most financial support over that past year? Whichever parent that is the parent who needs to be reported on the form. Okay, so for example, my parents are divorced. Let's say my mom provided more financial support this past year for me, then I would select that it's my mother's information that will be listed on the form. So that means it's only my mom's information. So it would be her income, her assets, nothing for my father, right? Because my parents are divorced. However, let's say my mom got remarried last year. So my mom's now remarried. Well, if she's remarried as of the day we're filing the FAFSA, and she's the parent that provided the most financial support, then her, along with her spouse, both need to be listed on my FAFSA form. Okay, so my mom and my step-parent would be listed on the FAFSA form for me. So it'd be both of their information. Okay, now I know sometimes that can be confusing. And also I know sometimes that parents will say, well, we ran the numbers. It's pretty much a 50-50 split in terms of who's providing more financial support. I will say right now, the FSA hasn't given us a lot of guidance. There hopefully will be more built into the FAFSA, again, into a help tool to kind of help you walk through who provides more financial support. But what FSA has said is, if it's a 50-50 split, if you run the numbers and you're like, well, we're split 50-50, then they say that you should use the parent that had the higher income and assets. And so that is how, if there is truly a perfect split, That's how you would know which parent to be provided in the form. It would be whoever has higher income and assets. Again, that's only if there's a split. If there's not, and you know which parent provided more financial support, that's the parent that's on the form. And again, if you have questions, use that chat feature. And again, I'll share my contact info, and you can always reach out to me and we can go through that together. Now, a big change this year, though, is depending on your parent situation, two parents may be required to create FSA ID accounts. So how would you know? Okay, so again, you're a dependent student, your parents are married or remarried and living in the same house. And so it's going to come down to, how did your parents file taxes? So if there's two parents in the household, if they filed their taxes married filing joint, only one parent needs an FSA ID account. That is the parent that will go out there and complete the parent FAFSA portion. If parents filed their taxes separately in 2022, or maybe the parents didn't file taxes at all, or one filed and one didn't, in those situations, then both parents need to create their own separate FSA ID account, and both will have to go out there and complete a parent portion of the FAFSA. The reason is because, as I talked about very briefly, your tax information is going to get pulled over directly from the IRS. Well, if you file two separate tax returns, they need both parents' permission to pull over those separate tax returns, add up the values, and report it to schools. So that's why, or if you didn't file taxes, right, they need to pull that information to prove both parents didn't file and send that information to the school. So if you didn't file jointly, both parents will need to create the FSA ID account. Both will have to go out there and complete the FAFSA. But if you did file jointly, only one needs it. It doesn't matter which. Either parent can create the account. Okay, so when the student gets through that kind of parent chart, it's going to then have them invite the parent, if there's a one-parent household, or invite both parents if there's a two-parent household, on the form. So the student is going to need to enter the parent's name, date of birth, social security number, and email address. Now, sometimes in this presentation, if I'm doing it in person, this is where I see some eyes like, oh, I'm not going to give my student that information, right? That's okay. What you would do is have your student have it up. You can come over to the computer or come over to their device. You can fill it in for them, right? You don't have to give this to them. You can fill it in and then hit continue. But even if parents filed their taxes jointly, you still have to invite both parents. Both parents will receive an email invitation, but only one actually needs to access that email and fill out the parent information. The other one can just delete it. Okay. So once the parent or parents, if they didn't file jointly, right, and there's two parents, once they get that email invite, they'll access studentaid.gov, they'll log in with the parent FSA ID, and they will go through the parent portion. Now you can see here, the parent section, it's very short. It's a lot faster than the student questions because there's only a few that you're going to have to go through. So the parent will go through just their parent portion and get to the end. Now, as I mentioned, there is a tool that will pull your tax information directly from the IRS. But I want to share that in order for this to work, you do have to provide consent. You do have to check a checkbox that allows the IRS to pull that information over, and that allows the IRS to share that information with the school and with us at FIA, right? Any state entity. So I will mention, because I have some parents that are like, well, what if we just want to manually enter it? You do have to provide the consent. This year, that's one of the biggest changes, is that the consent is required from all users. So even if you didn't file taxes, you still have to check the checkbox to provide consent. And it'll tell you, if you don't do that, your student cannot be considered for any federal or state financial aid. Okay, so it's a huge deal that you make sure you check that checkbox. Of course, if you don't, it's going to pop up a huge screen telling you what that means. So it would be hard not to do that. But that's what the consent is. Again, it's just that you can pull that 2022 tax information from the IRS and that it can be shared with the schools in order for them to award financial aid. If for some reason it doesn't work, or there's a reason, so for example, if your tax status, maybe you filed married filing joint, but now you're listing you're divorced, since that information doesn't match, you'll have to manually enter that tax information. If you get to that situation, it's going to be easy to walk you through it. also you can reach out to me, right? That's a situation we can have a call. I can kind of walk you through while you're going through that process. Okay. So after you do the FAFSA form, I do want to mention there's one more form you want to complete. This is called the Pennsylvania State Grant Form. This is in order to be considered for the Pennsylvania State Grant Program. It's a one-time form. You fill it out the first time your student applies for financial aid, so during their senior year, and then you will never have to do this form again, okay? It takes maybe 5 minutes to complete. It's very quick and easy. But because of the changes to FAFSA, it's really delaying when we can release the Pennsylvania State Grant Form. So as of right now, the State Grant Form will be available sometime mid-February, hopefully. That being said, we will send an email. So FIA is going to email the student directly once the State Grant Form is available, saying, hey, we received your FAFSA, follow these steps, go to FIA.org, create an account, and you can complete the State Grant Form. So just have your student be on the lookout for an email from us mid-February, sometime early March. And of course, we'll send multiple reminders so you can't forget about us. I do want to mention, FAFSA, State Grant Form, those are very important forms. There could be one more form you need to complete. Some of you might have already completed this. This is the College Scholarship Service Profile. It's used by about 400 colleges and universities across the US in order to award their institutional aid. If you're not sure if your school requires this, you can check on the school's website. Another very quick way to do this is to go to collegeboard.org. Under the CSS profile, there is a list of all of the schools that require the profile. You can filter by state to double check. You can filter, by school name. But this would be good if you're interested. It's usually our very highly competitive schools that require or suggest that you get this form completed. Again, this would be how they award some of their institutional grant money or scholarship money. Usually there are deadlines to complete this form. So I would always recommend just double check if there's any schools you're interested in, if they require it, or if they suggest this form. You can reach out to their admissions or financial aid team just to double check, do I need to complete this? What's it used for? And ask those types of questions. This is something done in addition to FAFSA. It doesn't replace the FAFSA. So you would do both of these in order to be considered for those specific schools. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to mention about FAFSA in general and this whole financial aid process, application process, is that, you're utilizing for my seniors 2022 tax information. It's already December of 2023. By the time you go to school, it's August of 2024. Things could look very different than they did when you were filling out your 2022 taxes. So if things have changed, maybe a family, like a parent or family member has lost their job, you can reach out to the financial aid office, letting them know, hey, our situation has changed. This is what's going on. This is what's happening. And they can reevaluate your financial aid eligibility and potentially update your financial aid awards based on that information. So definitely reach out to them directly if something has changed or if something changes in the future. So you file the FAFSA State Grant Form if needed, the CSS profile. That information gets sent to the schools, and then they kind of sit on that information. And they really don't do anything with it until you've been accepted to the school. Once your acceptance has gone through and once they get those forms and process it, they will then send you a financial aid notification. Now, with the delay in FAFSA, I would assume you're going to start to get these in March. So probably early March, you're going to start to get these financial aid notices from the schools you've been accepted to. And that brings us to step 4, which is comparing those aid notices. So if you apply to 5 schools, you get accepted to all 5, you would receive 5 separate financial aid notifications. And these are basically going to include, here's the cost of our school, here's the aid you're eligible for, and then after all your aid is applied, here's how much you owe, right? This is the leftover amount that you would still have to pay. So you would know from each of those schools, like in March, or even maybe at the latest early April, and you would be able to figure out if we decided to go to this school, how much would we have to pay? What are we going to owe? And figuring that out, your bottom line, what are your costs? Now, on the financial aid notice, it's going to include any institutional aid. So if they're offering you any grants or scholarships from the college, that will be listed, as well as any federal aid. So if you are eligible for any federal, the federal Pell Grant, federal work study, federal loans, those will be included on your financial aid notice. Now, I will mention grants, whenever we talk about grants, those are need-based. That is based on FAFSA's information. We're looking at household size, income, assets, etc. All of that comes into play. So grants are really heavily need-based. So not all students are going to qualify for the federal Pell Grant or the Pennsylvania State Grant. So the state grant is also need-based. We look at all that information in order to determine eligibility. One thing I'll mention, our state grant, the award amount that you can receive does base on the cost of the school. So the cost of the school does fluctuate kind of how much you could receive. So that's what that chart at the bottom is. And I do want to mention too, if you're looking to go to a school out of state, we do have a reciprocal agreement with students that go to school in Delaware, DC, Massachusetts, Ohio, Vermont, or West Virginia, where you can still be considered for a reciprocal PA state grant. However, the maximum grant is $600. It's not a huge amount considering what in-state is, but it's still better than zero. So you still get that state grant form complete, still get your FAFSA submitted every year by May 1st. Now, in addition to the grants, another type of need-based aid is federal work study. Now, it doesn't have the same criteria as the grants, so more students are eligible for work study. But what that means, and if it's on your financial aid notice, that means you are eligible for work study. But all it means is that you are eligible to apply for a work study position. Work study positions are not a guarantee, usually very competitive. Just like an off-campus job, if you get a position, you work, you earn a paycheck. Work study funds do not apply to your bill. So they don't reduce how much you owe the school, but it's extra money your student can earn. Usually work study jobs are on campus, and when the office is slow, usually you can do homework while you're getting paid to work, hence the name work study. So it is a little bit more flexible than if you had a job off campus. And I get asked this a lot. If you are not eligible for work study, there are usually other jobs on campus that do not require work study, but again, very competitive. So you want to apply early. Now, lastly, the last thing that'll be on the financial aid notice are federal student loans. So these loans are available to all students if you're a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen. Regardless of financial need, you can qualify for a federal student loan. The loan is in the student's name. There's no credit check. There's no cosigner required. There are no payments required while you're in school. However, there are two types of loans. The first type is a federal subsidized loan. I call that the sub loan. The sub loan is need-based. So again, does look at FAFSA information. Not all families will qualify, but more families qualify for the subsidized loans than the grants, right? It's a larger range. The sub loan, though, the government pays the interest on that loan while you're in school. So if you borrow the subsidized loan, when you graduate, it's the same amount. The other loan is an unsubsidized loan, the unsub loan. That loan, once it disperses, once it pays to your account, it will begin accruing interest. So subsidized, need-based, government pays interest in school. Unsubsidized, non-need-based, but the interest does accrue while you're in school. But in general, how much can you even borrow? Honestly, probably not as much as you think. A first-year dependent student, the maximum that you can borrow is $5,500 for the year, for the whole academic year, $5,500. That's it. Now, for those that qualify for a subsidized loan, it might be $3,500 subsidized loan, $2,000 unsubsidized loan. If you don't qualify for the need-based sub loan, you'll be offered a full $5,500 unsubsidized loan. It's up to the student to decide if they want to accept, reduce, or decline the loan. But when it comes to borrowing a loan for education, this is the only loan that your student can get in their name alone. The other loan options require a parent or someone who's willing to co-sign. This is why I cannot stress enough the importance of applying for scholarships. These loans, when we look at the cost of some of these schools, they don't even pay half of a first semester, right? Not even close to that. So we really need students to be applying for scholarships because when they want to borrow more loans, they're going to need you, their parent, right, to help them out or to co-sign. So step 5 in the whole process is be sure you have the money you need. When you get that financial aid notice and you say, okay, this is how much we owe for year 1, What you need to really think about is if you're going for a 4-year program, what's that cost multiplied by 4? And that's the cost that you need to figure out, can we afford? You don't want to just get your student in the door and then have them year 2 or year 3 realize they can't stay because they can't afford it. You want to make sure that when you pick your school, that that's a cost that you are willing to and able to pay and afford for all 4 years of their bachelor's degree program, if that's what they're going for. Right? That's the overall cost that you need to figure out. Is this affordable? Does it make sense to go to this school based on the cost? Now, there are additional loans to help you cover, but you don't necessarily have to pay out of pocket. But when it comes to covering with loans, there are some drawbacks. Okay, the first option are Federal Parent Plus loans. These are loans in the parent's name. So parents, you would be the one to borrow this loan. It's in your name for the life of the loan. The Parent Plus loan currently interest rate 8.05%. That rate changes every year on July 1st, so it will be different in the fall. Second, on top of that interest rate, the government takes origination fees of about 4.26% right off the top. They use that for origination and processing of the loan. You will never see that 4%, but you'll pay interest on it. That's option 1. Again, that's in the parent's name only. Option 2 are private alternative loans. These private loans are usually in the parent's name, or excuse me, whoa, scratch that. I'm still thinking about plus loans. I'm a slide behind. These are usually in the student's name. So majority of these loans are in the student's name, but 99% of my students will need a cosigner or a co-borrower on this loan. This is going to come from like a private lender or a financial institution. So they are heavily going to look at, what's your credit score? What's your credit history? What's your debt to income ratio? And how much are you borrowing? What repayment plan are you going to choose? And all of that is going to factor into the interest rate that they're able to offer you. So a lot of these have very varying interest rates, and that's because there's a lot of different criteria that comes into play. Biggest thing, all lenders are different. All of their terms are different. You really want to compare, make sure you're getting the best lender, the best interest rate that you can find, okay, and read the fine print with these. I will mention FIA. We do have our own private alternative loan. We started this program a few years ago to give families a little bit more affordable interest rates. That being said, it's a loan. There's a credit check process. Not all families are going to be approved. It's one of the many options. Compare them all. Figure out what's best. So what can you do now? These are just some general things that you can start to do. There's 2 websites, College Cost and studentaid.gov, with the aid estimator that are listed. These are 2 sites you can use now to start to kind of get an idea of what your cost could look like, right? You're going to be waiting till March till you get that financial aid notice. But if you're still figuring out where you want to apply, or maybe thinking about adding another school or 2, utilize that net price calculator, that financial aid estimator, to see what age you might qualify for and what your cost could be at the different schools. FIA, we're out there on social media. You can follow us for more information. I do want to mention I am doing some additional webinar opportunities. One of them is not pictured here. I just found out we're going to open it up to anyone that's interested. It's going to be on January 9th, and it's a FAFSA line-by-line overview. So just in a very short weeks, I will be doing a whole presentation, hour long, going through the exact screens of the FAFSA. This specifically would be for seniors who are ready to get through that process. So if you're interested, I'll make sure that when I send out all the presentation information and slides, I'll include the link for that January 9th webinar as well. The March 20th one is Understanding Comparing Financial Aid Offers. So by then you should have those aid offers in front of you, and we're going to walk through, what does it look like? How can you make sure you're comparing these carefully? What should be things that you're considering as you're going through these processes? Okay, there's some important resources at the top, just some, again, helpful links. Down below are some of the scholarship search sites. These are just a few of the national search sites. There are many more beyond this list, but it's a good place for students to start their search process. Again, you'll get the recording and these presentation slides, but I want to make sure no one misses this. This is my contact information here. Again, my name's Amy. I work with FIA. Again, we're the state organization. That's my email address there. Because because I cover all of Allegheny County, I'm out traveling a lot or doing presentations, so I can't always answer the phone. So the best way to reach me, send me an email with your questions, or if you want to set up an appointment, just send me some of your availability. And when I get back to you, we'll set up an appointment. I'm happy to help talk about this stuff over the phone, via email, whatever you prefer. But I know this is a lot of information. I know I talk very quickly, but I hope that this was a helpful resource for all of you. If you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. That is all the information that I had at this moment to share, but I just want to thank everyone so much for attending our webinar tonight. And I apologize for the issues getting logged into the webinar. I hope that you all made it, and I thank you for your patience as you got joined in with us.
No worries. Amy, thank you so much for all the great information. I do have a few parents who've sent me emailed questions as well. And I think one of the most popular topics that I'm seeing has to just do with whose information is reported again on the FAFSA in case of divorce. And so if I'm understanding you correctly, no matter who the child lives with, it is the parent who provides the most financial support. That parent's information will be reported on the FAFSA, and the other parent's information will not be reported at all, correct? And if the parent whose information is reported on the FAFSA remarried, that person's information will, the new step parent's information will also have a place on the FAFSA and be required on the FAFSA. Is that
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
I just need to be crystal clear about that.
Yeah.
And,
another thing too, like I get asked, well, I claim the student as a dependent on taxes. Does that matter? It doesn't. It doesn't matter who claims the student on taxes, and it no longer matters who the student lives with. It is completely, truly just based on who provides more financial support. Again, they haven't provided the best guidance on what that looks like, but things like who pays for their health insurance, who pays for their clothing, their food, who they live with more has to factor in to who provides more financial support, in my opinion. If you pay child support, that counts as support you're providing. So there's some general guidelines, but it's really up to the parent and parents themselves to figure that out. I've had parents that reach out to FSA and they're like, help me, how do I determine this? And FSA is like, it's up to you. Because they have no way of knowing that, right? There's no one in the world that would know who provides more financial support except the parents themselves.
Right. Another reminder I just want to give our parents, when you do start to receive financial aid offers from colleges, they vary quite a bit in the clarity of in terms of, okay, what are the costs for the following school year? Some colleges are still operating under like a 22-23 budget when they're sending out financial aid offers. So your first question is, what is our aid in light of next school year, the 24-25 school year? And if it's not clear, what portion of this, is in the loan category or the grant category or the scholarship category, don't hesitate to contact the financial aid counselors at the individual colleges and ask for clarity. Used to be back in the day, you'd get a giant, explanation book that would be included with all the financial aid awards. And now so much of it is online, but it can be hard to find it online and it's not always user friendly. So, especially as you're trying to compare awards from one to another, feel free to contact the colleges and ask them to walk you through, is the scholarship renewable? Are we getting this every year? What are the minimum requirements? Is there a GPA your student needs to maintain in order to keep that scholarship every year? Don't be afraid to get all the details of what your award includes. And I'm happy to help anytime. Amy is so responsive. I have to tell our Quaker Valley families, it's unbelievable how fast she replies on some of these emails that I send. And I know she's getting them from all over the county every day, all day. So we really appreciate all your helpfulness and your knowledge, and you're a great resource to not just Quaker Valley, but all the local high schools around here. So really appreciate your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. And thank you everyone so much for joining us. I know it's a lot, but I think it's really important that you're all here and thinking about this process now, right? So that it doesn't catch up to you later on. So I don't see any questions in the chat. Maybe I'm just that good, or maybe you need to digest some of this information. So you have my email. Like I said, I'm recording tonight. I'll send you the recording, the PowerPoint slides, and an email with all my contact information by the end of the week. So you'll have that. So if you have questions you think about later tonight or later this week, just email me. We can go over anything that you need. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.